Good evening. Welcome to the Rhythm Roast Cafe. I'm Tom.
I'm
This is Nick, Danny. Brendan's taking care of the technical stuff. I want to talk a little artistic stuff tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about movies, and I want to talk about some things that are going on at the College of DuPage. An artistic show, a Japanese print, a show on Japanese art prints, block prints. I go to the Wheaton Public Library. They give little lectures over there at night and learn some various things. And my girlfriend and I, Carol, we went over and saw about these Japanese prints, block prints that were a big form of Japanese art in the 18th century, 19th and 20th centuries.
What's a block print for all of us uneducated, unartistic individuals?
They take a wooden block and then they carve a design or a picture into it.
Okay.
And then they put it on ink and then they put it on paper. And then
I remember doing that in grade school with the little
Kind
cutters.
of the old way that they used
Yeah.
to do type.
And
For
what they would do different blocks for different colors, and it was like Technicolor, where they would add more colors to the same thing, and that's how they did that. So anyway, they're doing a show over there. There's a real thing you see all the time with this big blue Japanese wave, and you see it all over the place. And I thought it was a modern thing, but it goes back to the 1700s. With this one artist, all right, I have to look at a guy named Hokusai, and he was an artist in that era, in the 1800s, late 1700s, and there were a lot of artists working there. So the College of DuPage has this exhibition going on over there now. It's going to be there until September, and they're doing this in cooperation with an art museum from Genoa.
Really?
So DuPage County is
Is that a sister city thing?
No, it's just that there were people in Genoa at this museum they're interested in this too.
Had the
And when
same
they-
interest, huh?
Yeah. And people from all over the world are going to come to this exhibition. And they're going to have about 70 works there, block prints and some paintings and drawings. And they're going to have Japanese things, like they're going to have a Japanese garden set up. They're going to show Japanese tea.
And where's this at? The College of
At the
DuPage?
College of DuPage, yeah.
Is there a special area of the College of DuPage where they're
Well, there's a regular museum in there.
There's a
in the
museum?
area, yeah. And they've spent a lot of money putting on this. This is a big deal. This is really a big deal.
So when I started college, I was working a lot. Dad lost his business. I went to College of DuPage. And back then it was one big square building in the middle of this field.
Yeah, I remember that.
That's all it was. All right. And what they've transformed that campus into is really something. It's pretty impressive. It's one of the better
For a junior college,
Yeah.
it's almost like a university.
But, well, it really is. I mean, you can get any types of degrees there.
Right.
They're
They're 2-year degrees, or some of them are 3-year degrees.
You can get trade degrees. You can trade schools, things of that nature. But one of the things that the college has always had is they've had a really eclectic, cool radio station. WDCB.
Yes, they do.
WDCB
right.
is a phenomenal radio station.
Always
in that-
has been too.
Yes,
It's like a tradition
for
for
a
them.
very, very long time, and that's why I bring it up, because the arts, they're very, very into the arts, and especially the music. I mean, they do a blues thing, they do a bluegrass show, they do a fusion jazz, a Brazil. They do all types of different genres of music. They do the old radio comedy, if I'm not mistaken. So at any point, if you want to find something for
It's
either nostalgia
obscure
or
on the
your-
FM dial.
yeah, it's way at the end, but yeah, check out the WDCB. Their radio station sometimes is just outstanding in terms of their playlists and what they play. Just to add to your little artistic thing.
So
Yeah.
when you announced that you were going to talk about movies, you know, and I immediately thought of movies that were impactful, had an impact on my life, and I thought of the first time a movie ever had a social impact on me. Okay, it was my first date. I was 16 years old or 17, something like that, and I took this girl that lived down the street that always used to walk past my house on her way to the grocery store. I finally had the nerve. I was a freshman or sophomore in high school. And asked her if she wanted to go see a movie, and she goes, "What movie?" And I said, "Love Story." And she goes, "Oh yes, I wanted to see
You're
it."
such a romantic, Dan.
You know,
Unbelievable.
I didn't know what it was about. All I knew was that somebody had told me, if you want to really get a date, just tell the girl you're taking her to Love Story, and then she'll go right with you no matter what.
You
Right?
sure it wasn't a man and a woman?
What?
It was probably a man and a woman. You got that mixed up with Love Story. Because when Love Story came out, you were way past your naive days.
Well,
But in the 60s,
Yeah.
the mid-60s, there was a
That sounds
French
like-
movie called A Man and a Woman that showed down there at one of those art theaters, like at Michigan and Chicago.
no,
Nah, he wouldn't have done that.
No, this was because I remember one of the lines from the story was. Being in love never means having to say you're sorry, okay? And I said, I got to write that down. You know, I know I'm going to use that at some time in the
I can't
future.
think of the movie theater that was down the street from you
that
on
movie
Grand
had to
Avenue.
be like 1972 or something. Come
Well,
on.
all right, so I was 20.
What was the movie theater down the street from you?
Well, there was the Montclair and
Montclair.
the
Mercury.
Mercury. Mercury was further away on North Avenue, but the Montclair was in walking distance.
Excuse
You
me.
know, and the other thing is, this is for DeSantis. I have to say this for DeSanctimonious, all right, as the great Donald Trump calls him.
1970.
You know, and what happened when you say things are condemned or you ban them, you make them absolutely a must
I gotta
attraction.
check that out.
It's a must, okay? So anything he banned in Florida is going to be right up there on the list of, let's see what it's all about.
Well, what
okay,
is
he couldn't.
what is
where
he
you going?
banned? Where?
Well, here's what I'm saying is that when it comes to movies, the Catholic Archdiocese tried to do this when I was a young kid in grade school.
Legion of
8th grade.
Decency.
Yeah, they would have, every Friday they would post, the Archdiocese would post a condemned list, okay? And it was all these movies, Splendor in the Grass, Lolita, that kind of stuff, right? They were all condemned. Well, when they were posted by the nuns at 12 noon on Friday, as soon as they let us out for lunch, we lined up to find out what movies we were going to go see.
So what is DeSantis banning?
Well, he banned some stuff about the history of Florida and what it had to do with slavery or something like that. It was a slavery history kind of a class or course or book or whatever.
I got to look into that for next week. I got to see what that's all about.
So that movie affected you.
Yeah, that movie affected me. It gave me lines. Okay, it also showed the first. It was my first experience because I grew up in Pizza Park. It was mostly Italians, right? I knew one Irishman, and he was like 3 blocks away, and that was an interface between Irish and Italian. Okay, and it was set in Boston, but it was not that dissimilar to what was going on in my neighborhood, so it was my first exposure at that. But yeah, that was a memorable movie, in my respect. There were other memorable movies, but I don't know if anybody ever saw them. Did you see all those horror movies that came out in the 70s?
I wasn't big on the horror movie thing. I was a
Mm-hmm.
little scared. I mean, I was young, but
Well,
I was a little scared.
There
of
were
some of
horror
those
movies, and then there were terrible movies. Okay,
Wow.
There was a movie called Echo, which is an Italian-made movie. Echo doesn't mean echo; it's ECCO, meaning this is. Okay, and it was supposed to be an expose on the weirdness of cults across the world. It was a follow-up or a prequel to another Italian movie called Mondo Cane. Okay,
Mondo Cane was
that was the
before
big
it.
weird one.
That
Okay.
started that kind of thing.
I kind of feel like Will
Yeah.
did when we were talking about old concerts because I have no idea any of these movies.
Well, I'll give you one scene from Mondo Cane.
Why?
Okay, well, just to show you what the movie
the
was
Laplanders.
about. The Laplander scene. Okay, that's well, the custom in this land. They took a film, a documentary. It was black and white, and they showed a custom of this Laplander tribe up near the Arctic Circle. When they had a wedding, what they would do is the groom would go hunt and capture a reindeer. Or, with the antelope ears and reins and stuff, right? Antlers, right? And he'd tie him up, and they'd drag him over to where the bride was. And then the bride would orally castrate the reindeer and pass the testicles from her mouth to the husband-to-be's mouth. This was in this movie. I saw it at a drive-in, and then I don't remember what happened after that scene. Okay, it was just one thing after another. They had this other scene in someplace in India where it was a tradition that they had to make a human pyramid to the third story to get some kind of a
These
scroll.
are movies that impacted your life.
Well, yeah.
I'm trying to figure out-
Yeah, well, it was an impact because people.
Or did
It
you
was
just
my
think they
first
were just
experience
weird?
with people being really weird. I mean, they could be really weird, And from that, I took cultural anthropology as an elective when I got to college, just to see if they were really as weird as these movies showed.
the movie that
Who was the guy that had the old travel program on TV? Was it Travel Passage to India or something? I mean, it was. Never mind. Go ahead. I didn't know. If he
British
was
guy?
Yeah, I don't know. It was some guy that traveled around and he took home movies and.
Not
No,
Rick
I mean-
Steves.
No, way before him. Way before.
there was
him,
Charles Corral traveled around the United States in a motorhome. Something. The
So does
movie
Clarence
that
Thomas.
woke me up when I was 7 years old was The Searchers.
Yeah,
Okay,
John-
that's probably John Wayne's best movie.
Yeah, and it's John Ford directed it. And I saw it when I was 7 years old. And
Was
I've
that
been
racist?
watching Hop Along
Yeah.
Cassidy.
It was a
Oh,
it was
definitely.
promoting racism.
No,
Kinda,
it was
wasn't
showing
it?
racism. The character that John Wayne plays is he's a bad man.
Yeah.
But he knows what he's doing. But he's a racist. He's full of hatred. He hates everybody.
His mission in that is to find his kidnapped niece and basically
Kill her.
Yes.
Yeah,
right.
when he can't
So
get her back, he wants to kill her because
It was like
he's
an
killed with the
honor death,
Comanches.
like an
Yeah, he
honor
wasn't
stoning from
exactly.
the Arab
He
country.
didn't want her to be assimilated or become part of the Indian tribe.
Well, the thing was that if she'd been defoiled already or deflowered or
yeah,
whatever.
but that to me that was probably John Wayne's best movie.
Well, that's the one that Wayne thought was. But Wayne did his best work for John Ford
Right.
and Howard Hawks because they both intimidated him. And another movie that Wayne did really good was he did for Otto Preminger in Harm's Way,
Right.
where he plays a Navy captain and he's laid back and there's a very realistic kind of adult romance in that movie between John Wayne and Patricia Neal, and
Right.
That's one of Wayne's best. But The Searchers, it got me. I mean, I'm 7 years old. I already know a lot of history. By the time I was 7, and it gets into the blood feud between the Comanches and the Texans. The Comanches, the only Americans that the Comanches killed were Texans. They didn't go north, raid Kansas. They didn't seek out other Americans, but they sought out Texans, and there was a history behind that. But in that movie, you know, John Wayne, he shoots the dead Indian's eyes out,
Right.
So that the guy is blind in the hereafter. He shoots 3 other Texans, the white men in the back,
Yeah.
right?
In the back.
Yeah. He scalps an Indian. He scalps Scar, right? And I'm watching all. I never watched Hopalong Cassidy again. Roy Rogers. I'm done with Roy Rogers. And I knew at 7 from reading about the eastern frontier, like in Kentucky and New York. I knew that Americans scalped Indians on occasion, you know.
Yeah, it
So I wasn't surprised that
didn't
John Wayne
Cook's
scalped,
buddy, wasn't he as...
but to see it on the screen in 1956.
Yeah.
And that movie now, today, it's one of the best 10 movies ever made. The best was all the critics love it. Martin Scorsese loves it. Steven Spielberg loves it. John Milius loved it. The guy that made Star Wars loves it. But when it came out, it was just
Lucas.
nobody paid it any much attention. Just another John Ford Western.
My favorite John Wayne movie is when he played the Irishman and fought with
The Quiet
McLaughlin.
The Quiet Man.
Yeah.
That was another John Ford movie.
It was, you know, and that fight scene is epic because it rolled across
The whole countryside.
the whole countryside, right? And you had both religions involved, you know, the priest
But
was
also,
giving-
when
This is a
he's,
private
dragging,
fight.
when he's dragging Maureen O'Hara back to her brother, and he's like dragging her and knocking her down hills, and like that's not happening nowadays in a movie.
what a beautiful woman she was.
She was.
Oh my goodness, what a beautiful
My
woman.
mother-in-law actually likes that movie because it has that whole old dowry, you know, promised marriage, arranged marriage
Yeah.
type of thing.
Yeah.
My mother-in-law was put on a boat with 200 other women and shipped to
Promised.
shipped to Australia and got off the boat and married my father-in-law the next day.
Wow.
And were happily married until he passed away in the 90s. But out of the 200 women that went there, one woman didn't get off the boat, because back in Greece in the late 40s, early 50s, there were no men left. There were no men there, you
Right.
know, and she was literally a farm girl working the fields, cutting wheat by hand, doing all those types of things. And, you know, her brother became a very educated man. He's a writer, he's a scholar. And her mother said, "You're not going to stay here, okay?"
So what movies moved you in life?
Mine is a little different approach. I used to spend a lot of time, you know, visiting my aunt on the north side, and we would watch a lot of the old movies. She loved movies. She loved watching movies. She loved reading autobiographies of stars. She worked at a wine store on Rush Street, where everybody that performed in Chicago stayed at the Playboy Club, and they would go to this liquor store and buy all their booze and all their expensive wines because it was the only
For the
place in
hotel.
Chicago. Yeah. So she knew a lot of these people. I think, you know, old movies something about, you know, Errol Flynn and Robin Hood and the Seahawk and those types of swashbuckler movies to me were just, I mean, and to
You
this
speak
day,
treason
yeah, and
fluently.
to this day, my wife even said, I like watching period movies, period pieces. I like being taken back to places that, you know, to another time and another place.
Earl Flynn and Basil Rathbone swashbuckling
all
up and
day
down the
long,
stairs,
man,
right?
all day long.
With the score by Wolfgang Korngold.
Yeah, you were talking about that with BB Spin.
You know, yeah.
You know, the other one is the Mark of Zorro.
Tyrone Power and Basil Rathbone.
And if you watch that movie close enough, there's two things that stood out to me in that movie. One is the horsemanship. There's a scene where and then the horse just jumps over the thing and goes into the river, and it's like, oh my God, how did they do that? But the other thing is the swordsmanship, and there's a scene where just before the final battle between him and Basil Rathbone takes a sword and he swipes the candle, and the candle falls.
I love that scene.
And then Tyrone Power just takes this thing and he goes, and if you look really close, you see the candle move.
Yeah.
And he laughs, and then he goes over and he picks it up like this.
Right.
But if you look real close, you could see that he actually just switches it and doesn't move.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, that is so cool.
Yeah.
I mean, how do they do that? Now it's all CGI and you know, half the movies that it seemed to be coming out now are all computer graphic movies. They're all cartoons. They're modern day cartoons.
They used to
watch.
put thousands of people on the screen. There was a a movie Cary Grant and Frank Sinatra of all people made in the mid '50s called The Pride and the Passion about the Napoleonic Wars in Spain. And then they put thousands of people on the
Wasn't
screen.
that the shtick for Cecil B. DeMille?
Cleopatra.
Whenever he had a film, it was
Cleopatra.
Cleopatra.
Cast of
you had
thousands.
casts of thousands,
Yeah. Well, Cecil B. DeMille, he did a lot of shooting. Like you watch the Ten Commandments, which is a great movie. I mean, it's got some of the best lines. You know, the city he builds shall bear my name. The woman he built, the love shall bear my child. You know, and all that stuff. Even many, but most of the movie was shot inside on soundstage.
Oh, yeah.
And there's only a few scenes that are really outside.
with a lot of people.
Yeah, DeMille liked it. To
Well, I
control
think that's the
thing.
first time I ever saw the kind of editing that would have the seas depart, where they parted the Red Sea and the guy was going through the Red Sea, the people were going through the Red Sea, and I said, wow, that's pretty good. How'd they do that? It was a
Special effects.
First
It
special effect.
it actually took some ingenuity
and that was
create 'em.
before Star Wars, and I think Star Wars is what changed everything to CGI. Because the suggestion of the success of Star Wars, and they just started to use a little bit.
So
Well, they were doing all what original Star Wars was all models.
Yeah,
Yeah, there was no CGI.
the 50th anniversary of Jaws is coming out now. And I was reading an article actually this morning about Spielberg, and he was 27 years old and over budget, and the first time they put the shark in the water it sank and they had to pull it up, and Richard Dreyfuss is saying this movie is just going to suck so bad. This is going to ruin my career type of stuff, and it ended up being this marvel. Why? Because John Williams, who originally they laughed at his score, but then when they put it to the film, it was like, okay, that's a great effect.
Yeah.
And then the other part was you didn't see the monster until almost
Right.
halfway through the movie.
right. It was
You
the
never
suspense.
saw the
It was
monster.
like the 1930s horror movies. You only saw the shadow. You never saw the guy.
Yep.
You never saw Nosferatus or whatever his name was.
See now, and you go back to those. I love the old detective movies. I love The Thin Man. I loved Sam Spade movies. Bogart.
Charlie Chan.
Charlie Chan, absolutely.
Saturday morning, Charlie Chan.
It was a story, and you had to try to figure
Yeah.
it out, and it was like they weren't long. I mean, they were an hour 20, sometimes hour 40 if they were really long movies. And that's why they made those movies back then, because they could have 2 or 3 of them at a feature. And
Well, the Basil Rathbone Sherlock Holmes series was
Terrific.
They're
remarkable.
good.
It's just-
Then
terrific. I mean,
the guy who played Watson was good too, whatever that guy's name
Nigel
was.
Bruce.
yeah,
Nigel Bruce.
yeah, he was good. He was in the Charge of Light Brigade with Errol Flynn.
Oh, yeah. Earl Flynn, Men in Tights.
Crazy guy.
There's another one directed by
crazy
Marco
weird guy.
Curtiz.
During Earl Flynn's reign, there was a guy who challenged him for a while. He played Ivanhoe in the series. What the hell was
Robert
his?
Taylor.
Robert Taylor.
No,
He
no.
was in Ivanhoe.
No, this was a series. He had the pompadour hair. I think he played one of the James Bond substitutes for Roger Moore. Roger Moore.
Roger Moore. How was he a rival or
He
was-
came later.
way later?
He was playing Ivanhoe, and that was character similar to Robin Hood. Robin Hood was always he was for the French, wasn't he? The Duke, Richard the Lionheart, right?
Well, he was for the king.
Yeah.
It was for the king.
And Prince John, the king's brother, is the bad guy.
Yeah, but wasn't Prince John the actual English guy, and Richard couldn't even speak English?
Well, they were both French.
Yeah, they were both
Well, they were
Norman.
English. They were Plantagenets.
Yeah,
they
the Norman
originated.
conquerors.
They weren't Normans.
No?
No, they weren't Normans. They were after the Normans. The Norman dynasty had died out. They were new. They were from
Henry II?
They were from Western France. They weren't from
So-
Normandy.
So any rock and roll or music movies
Yes,
that
Led
stand,
Zeppelin Becoming Led Zeppelin.
You just
That was-
you
on
mentioned
Netflix.
that before we
That
got
was a
started.
watch
good.
that.
It's a good series. You ought to check it out. I like the part where they were singing in that. It was a James Bond movie. Goldfinger, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, because
And
John
they're-
Paul
You know,
Jones was a
I've
studio
tried.
guy.
I've tried watching "Song Remains the Same" a couple of times. I can't get
That's
through it.
terrible.
I cannot get through it. It is so bad.
That's terrible.
No, this one he's talking about is good.
It's
you
a
know?
history. It's how Led Zeppelin formed. It's
how they
they're
formed
talking
and
their
whatever.
background. Jimmy Page and John Paul Jones were very accomplished, big studio musicians.
Yeah, Jimmy Page was a
Playing on all
remarkable guy.
kinds of things.
Bad.
You know, I mean, he was in bands with well, he followed guys
in
like
the
Jeff
Yardbirds.
Beck and Eric Clapton, and he was to some people better than those two guys.
I think he is.
You know, well, I think my estimation is Clapton's got the most melodic lead guitar. You know, I mean, he finds
he
he
evolved.
finds the stuff that evokes energy out of you. Okay, Jeff Beck has the weirdest solos. I mean, if you ever listen to Beck's Bolero, I mean,
Okay, please do not try to simulate guitar solos.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Jimmy Page was in the best band.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote. He was in a band that wrote better songs than
Well, no, Cream was a pretty good band.
Cream. Yeah, but they were gone.
Yeah, well,
You
they were
know,
only 1 year.
They didn't last,
They didn't like each other.
and they weren't heavy. They
Oh,
had a couple of
shock.
songs that were heavy.
What
but
do
they
you know?
weren't
As a
heavy.
drummer, what did you think about Ginger Baker? I mean, where would you put him? Up in the top 10 drummers you've seen? The top 5?
He was good in Cream. He made Cream sound like Cream.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, he didn't do anything before or after that ever came to my attention.
I mean,
And
he
then
had
he always considered himself a jazz drummer. He thought he was too good to be a rock drummer. You know.
well, I remember him as doing the double bass run.
Yeah.
Okay, that was his big thing. Ba-bum, ba-bum,
But
ba-bum.
the guy in Blue Cheer, Paul Whaley, there's a drummer nobody talks about.
No.
Because nobody knows who he is.
Yeah.
And he laid some of the basic heavy metal drum gags that you hear guys doing still. And Paul Whaley was doing the boom, 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 you know, and that kind of thing. He was doing it. Blue Cheer is a much overlooked band, and arguably the first heavy metal band.
One of my favorite drummers was Ainsley Dunbar. I always thought that was,
I remember
Carmen
he was with
Apache.
Journey.
Yeah.
He was power drummer.
Yeah.
That guy was a power drummer. Carmine Appice from Vanilla Fudge.
I know.
So, what was the first movie, without getting into musicals? Okay, what was the first movie that really kind of bridged the gap between movie and music? Where was it? Help? Was it? You know,
I never thought much of Help.
I
Did you?
didn't either. But I mean, we
Yeah.
had musicals. We had, you know, you had.
But there was
the Wizard of Oz.
But
You
there,
had
yeah,
My
there was.
Fair
Wasn't
Lady,
there a
you
big
had
shift?
Those were movies that were musicals that were made into movies, or you know.
Well,
that's
Well,
what
in
the
the
Wizard of
50s,
Oz.
you had movies that featured,
Right.
like The Girl Can't Help It.
Always had a sing. There was always a performance in those 40s and
There was a-
50s movies.
Yeah, it was
movies.
76 trombones, you know, that kind of.
No. I'm just saying, like, just
No, you would see like a band perform.
point, and,
Yeah.
and some woman
Little
would sing.
Richard.
Yeah, it was. They'd always inject some type of song into these old black and white movies that I remember seeing. There would always
Okay.
be a performance by somebody, some two-bit actress that maybe had a decent voice, or they overdubbed her, and she'd sing some song, and
Well,
then
if you
she'd
go
get shot.
far enough back, you got Lucille Ball doing a lot of
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
But so you know, where did movies cross over into to really make a big hit into the music industry?
It might have, you know, some of it. I
Saturday
think
Night Fever.
Saturday Night Fever is a good guess. Okay, you know, it could have been Saturday Night Fever, could have been Grease.
I think Grease came after that, but yeah.
Grease is a musical.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
It was- yeah,
like
it was
any
just-
other musical.
Well, so is Saturday Night Fever. That's a musical.
No, but it didn't start out that way.
It wasn't a musical because the
was a
characters,
soundtrack.
the characters didn't.
It sold a lot of albums.
But it was a
You
sound.
made the Bee Gees crossover.
I understand.
Yeah,
that,
but it wasn't a musical
it's not
because
a musical. The artists weren't performing the song in the movie.
Right.
It was
Yeah.
a soundtrack.
They didn't break into
Purple
song and
Rain
dance.
is a,
Right.
you know, he performed that, but that was his stuff. That was another movie that kind of went overboard in terms of crossing between it being a movie and being a musical performance.
Well, Grease wasn't a musical performance.
No.
No, but it was a musical
Well,
movie.
West Side Story, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Who, by the way, you ever watch, if you ever get a chance to watch West Side Story again, watch the two dance scenes when they were going to fight at the dance hall when the two band and then,
Da-da-da-da-da.
and then when Rita Moreno and the Sharks go
America?
back,
America.
that's
great.
just tremendous stuff. Okay,
I
is it
watch
out
that
there?
all the time.
It is. That
No,
one of
the
the only
timing.
women.
It's good timing.
my
The
Lord.
choreography and timing was
Oh
good.
my God! And they had a Greek guy,
George
George
Chakiris,
George
yeah.
But you know, I kind of like the last scene in Grease. I think that was put together very well because they drew the whole movie back together. You got to see everybody in it. You
I don't know who is playing bass on You're the One That I Want, but that is some of the best bass playing I have ever heard on that.
Really?
Did you see Spielberg's West Side Story?
No.
Well, I went and saw it, and I thought I'd hate it
Mm-hmm.
because I like the old West Side Story, and I like Robert Wise, the director, who made some terrific movies. Made the best ever submarine movie, Run Silent, Run Deep.
I like that movie.
And he made The Sound of Music, and he made West Side Story, but I don't know where I was going. Oh, Steven Spielberg's movie was okay, but he did a number. They moved the American number from a rooftop onto the street, and I'm thinking, he
I mean, everything's good in America.
No, it was like the scene at Ray's Music Shop in the Blues Brothers, and I'm thinking, Spielberg, you bugger. You just ripped off the Blues Brothers. And he knew it. Spielberg knows everything about every movie. He knows, I'm going to do it like the Blues Brothers at Ray's Music Shop.
There's another one, the Blues Brothers. I mean, that's another movie where the soundtrack of that just took off.
That's a perfect movie. If you come into that at the middle of the movie, you watch the rest of it, right?
Yeah, you don't. It doesn't depend on an involved plot. You know, it's
I just look around and see all the places on there that I remember that don't exist anymore. It's always kind of depressing.
well,
going around
watching
through the
that car
city of
go through the
Chicago.
Ford shopping center.
Oh, down in the south suburbs there.
Amazing that they got away with that stuff. It's amazing that the Chicago police let them smash all those cars up.
Well, under the Lake Street L down there.
I think they smashed up over 100 and some odd cars in that movie. I think it was the total
You know,
number.
and it was the longest
And they
time.
just kept coming. Right?
Wasn't it Mayor Daley's policy to not let Hollywood in Chicago?
Well, it was Mayor Byrne then.
It was Byrne, yeah. That let
She was down
opened
there
it up.
hanging around with him.
Yeah, well, she was into entertainment.
Yeah.
She wanted to get music back on the lakefront. And what was wrong with Daley? I mean, he had a feather up his butt that was so bad. You know
What they say about Jane Byrne, Daley taught her everything she knew.
Yeah.
But he didn't teach her everything he knew.
So I used that liquor store that my aunt worked at. I worked at during college as well, and they would deliver to the Gold Coast. You know, they didn't just a guy that did nothing but deliver one bottle of booze, bottle of wine. Jane Byrne and her husband would get a half a gallon of Wolf Schmidt vodka every other day.
Really? Is that good stuff?
No, it's rot gut vodka. Okay, it's what they in the industry they call rack. It's the rack booze. Okay, every other day they would go through a half a gallon of vodka.
Wow. I wonder if they had a lot of orange juice too, if they just did it straight.
Oh, I doubt it.
It's just a little olive.
It's too much orange juice.
Dirty martini, huh?
Too much orange juice.
Well, I know a guy who drank a quart of VO every day.
You know, I had a very
At work.
I had a very close friend who I've known for half a century. Had a lot of problems that she's worked through in her life. Anyway, she told me to watch this movie called Straw. And I've never heard of it. And the title of the movie seems to have nothing to do with the movie, okay? I mean, I'm trying to figure it out while I'm watching this movie. It's the most gripping as well as depressing movie that you could want to see. It goes through the trials and tribulations of these women. I think you'd like it because this single mother goes through all of these problems, and some of them is legal, and everything she does turns to shit. You know, it's just.
I'm sorry, but I'm not into depressing movies.
I know.
Somebody said, somebody in the movie, Whale,
Yeah.
Yeah.
what Brendan Fraser
Yeah.
said it's a terrific movie. I had no desire to see it. I don't want to see some guy wallowing in his own self-pity that just wants to die. That's not entertainment to me. Okay? I see enough of that on my daily basis, okay? I mean, I just had a client that stroked out at 63 years old. I don't know what's going to happen to him. I don't need depressing. I
Right.
want to see if I go to the show, whatever they call it, show, movies, whatever we call
The
it
pictures.
now. I
I
want
go
to
to
see
pictures.
something. I want to see
Cinema.
something that's to be seen on a big screen that I'm going to enjoy on a big screen.
With big speakers.
My kid and I think I mentioned it. We went and saw. I can't think of the name of it. About a detail that was stuck in Pakistan that got their butts kicked and how they got in and got
I
out.
think I remember the movie you're talking about.
And I said, I want to go see that on a big screen. That's a movie that needs to be seen there. I don't want to see that at home
Movies
on my
like
television.
Saving Private Ryan.
Saving
Okay,
Private
yeah,
Ryan,
yeah,
or
yeah.
you know, a Star Wars type of movie. Something, you know, I'm just not going to go to the movies to see a movie, and I'm certainly not going to watch something depressing.
Well, when you talk about movies to see if they've made an impact on you, some movies make a long-term impact on you, you know, a psychological, but there's others that you can see kids coming out, or young men, young boys coming out of the movies already, you know, they're ready for something. One of those movies was The Warriors.
Warriors.
Okay. The Warriors. We
Turned
actually
into a cult.
we actually got hired at several movie theaters who were showing the Warriors, you know, to do security there, because they were, after the show, they were tearing the sheets, the seats out of the movie theater, throwing them through the screen and doing all kinds of stuff, you know. The one sentence from that movie that is worthwhile to remember is, "Warriors, come out and play, yay! Warriors," you know. And the thing that's funny about it was watching these guys. I mean, we're in Chicago. A street gang in Chicago looks nothing at all like these
There are not a whole lot of gangs
gangs
that
that
did
were
look like that.
in
Did
the
you read
Warriors.
that book?
No.
When I was in high school, I read that book that the movie was made from.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Did they describe them like that one gang that was dressed up in baseball uniforms?
Nah, not really.
With the white face?
But
Yeah.
the one
White
the
black
one
face.
gang, they used to steal hood ornaments off Mercedes Benzes and wear that.
And wear them around their neck, right?
But that
And
guy
what
that
about
goes,
the lesbian
Warriors
gang?
come out and play. That's the guy that in Commando that Arnold let him go.
Oh, yeah,
What happened
yeah,
to
yeah.
Sully? I let him go.
He was in 48 Hours, too.
But that movie was directed by Walter Hill. He made a lot of good movies.
Did he?
He made one that nobody likes but me. It's a
Well,
remake of
We're
Young
coming
Jimbo.
to the comment section, and if you got any comments you want us to read off or questions, give us a few.
Do we hit a nerve?
You guys got a couple good ones here. So one is from John saying that Jane Byrne wanted to bring F1 racing to downtown Chicago. And then we just had Craig tune in and said the Blues Brothers left town owing a lot of money. There's still locations that won't let productions film because of the Blues Brothers.
Wow, I didn't know
I
that.
didn't know that either. They
The Blues Brothers.
never sued the estate, huh?
Well, yeah, why wouldn't you just sue the production company for the money that they owed?
Maybe they owed it personally. Maybe they left big bar tabs behind them.
Hey,
Somebody
I
had
asked
to.
you a legal question once a long time ago, and I forgot what you gave me as an answer. When people are required, when police are required to wear a body cam, and this comes up with this one that just happened now, right?
Now they are required. It's all pretty much the new law that they all got to have them.
All right. Now, if they're required as part of their job, how does that affect their Fifth Amendment rights?
Whose?
The police.
Police aren't in custody, so they don't have Fifth Amendment rights.
But they're
Okay, so
incriminating
let's-
themselves with their
okay,
own
so
words.
No. So let's make sure we understand what
Yeah.
the Fifth Amendment is. Okay,
Yeah.
the Fifth Amendment is a protection against self-incrimination. You have to be detained or in custody in order for then your Fifth Amendment rights to
come into play.
To come into play, and that's when you have to be with the Miranda. You know, you have the
Yeah.
right to remain silent and stuff. So if the average person doesn't feel that he's free to leave, then that is the kind of the benchmark for when somebody is determined to be in custody. All right. So that's when your Fifth Amendment rights apply. So a police officer doesn't have Fifth Amendment rights just because he's on tape. Okay, just because he's handling a situation. Okay.
Now, I have a personal opinion on how to address the issue of police brutality. Okay, I think,
Yeah, obey the police.
huh?
Obey the police.
Well, that's
Oh,
one
it's
part
really
of it.
simple.
Well, yeah, but not all of it.
99.9% of the time, Danny, if you do what the police tell you to do, you're not going to get your ass kicked or shot or killed or maimed. Okay, you're not.
True, but you could also be implicated wrongly. Okay,
That's
and
what courts and lawyers are for.
I
Thank you.
understand that. I understand that, but I think there wouldn't be as many brutality, Floyd kind of situations if the police got or removed from having quantitative immunity, and would be just like security guards, that they could personally
Absolutely
be
not.
sued.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You cannot take governmental immunity away from police officers.
How about
You would-
lawyers?
first of
Can
all,
do
you would
that there?
never, you would never,
Judges?
you would never have anyone be a cop if they were subject to personal liability.
Well, we got hundreds of guys that wanted to be security. It's the same problem.
And they were security guards because they worked for us, and we had an insurance policy that covered them.
Yeah, well, you
Okay.
can do the same thing with cops. You can have the police insurance
Well,
policy.
the city does. You know, they
Right.
vote to pay out, cases all the time.
all the time.
Okay. So yeah, they kind of do.
But the individual
But-
cop is, and not only the cop, but officers of the court are immune to
Yes.
prosecution.
No,
individual.
no. Government workers,
Okay.
not just police.
Right.
Okay, any and all government workers have a protection of governmental immunity. So if the guy at the zoning office over there negligently filed your paperwork and you built the house on the wrong lot, you can't sue him personally because he made a mistake. He's got governmental immunity.
But you can sue the government.
You might be able to sue the government and have him redress what was done wrong, but he's not personally liable.
Yeah, and that defeats the idea of personal responsibility.
I think one problem is a lot of police today are ex-military police, and they have a different
No.
attitude. They think that they have an automatic authority.
No,
No,
being
it's
in
actually
that
just
business.
Tommy, it's actually just the opposite.
Yeah.
Okay, most of them are not ex-military. Most of them are. A lot of these guys are like associate degrees in criminal justice or whatever they're doing, and they're out there and they got the bat belt, as I call it. They got the vest with all the stuff, and they're cops.
And they invest themselves in the idea of making society better. They're gonna
Yeah, I
they're
think
gonna
I-
make the
I-
difference. They're truly going into it for the right reasons. The problem is
A lot of 'em.
The problem is when they're in there long enough, it starts to taint you. Okay, I mean, our guys. Okay,
Yeah.
You got another comment?
I said any job will.
Yeah, any
After
job
you
will
say
be
it,
that.
any
Yeah.
job it'll taint you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm doing what I'm doing long enough, and it's like it's hard. It's hard to care and to keep that that drive going because when I was a public defender, man, it was like, oh, I'm trying.
Well, you
this guy.
start to see patterns. You think you're seeing patterns in people's behavior, and you
originally-
ascribe it to everybody in that group.
Getting back to what you were saying, originally, the Illinois State Police, the only thing they ever hired was ex-military MPs. And those guys were as badass as they came, and you didn't mess with it. Even though all they did was patrol the tollways, they were the best, hands down. I never hit the old time coppers. I never hit the troopers. I never had a problem with any of those guys. They were by the book. They were professional, and they were tough.
A little bit on the side about veterans, preference for veterans. Delta Airlines will give preference or won't, I think, hire any pilots that haven't gone through military training. So you have
Well,
to.
that limits the pool. I don't know. I don't know what.
Well, they're not
is
they're
that
not American and they're not United, so they don't have to fill that many jobs. But I think that I don't know if it's still that
What airline?
Delta.
Delta's one of the biggest airlines in the country.
Yeah, but
What are you
it's
talking
not
about?
as big as the other two. It's
Yeah, it
junior.
is. Yeah, it is. It's the number one rank too, by the way.
Really? Well,
Yeah.
if you look at their uniforms, those are the most military uniforms of all of the airline pilots.
Well, you got this militarization of the police. They like wearing combat boots, carrying M16s, wearing camouflage. You know,
Yeah.
you saw these police in the last couple of weeks wearing masks, like they were a Guatemalan death squad or something. You know.
Yeah, how did they
And
get
you know,
away with that?
they took on Bonnie and Clyde.
I'm not a big
They
fan
were
of that.
wearing suits. They didn't have armor. They didn't, and even if a cop wears armor, he doesn't have to look like a soldier. You know, he doesn't have to wear.
Speaking about
problem-
armor, how did
boots.
that woman policeman get shot in the back? Isn't the vest got Kevlar in the back as well?
It could go through the side, Danny, go right through. It's not.
Boy, that guy must feel like a
It's gotta
pile
feel
of
horrible.
dog poop.
Yeah, gotta feel horrible.
With a pistol was she shot?
Yeah, they
police-
were chasing some guy down, and her one of the like she got
Friendly fire.
Friendly fire. The police officer got killed about 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago on that.
Now, is the guy they were chasing, is he liable for that?
Yeah, that's an interesting stretch. It really depends on the
Because I've
facts of
heard
that one.
that if a police action happens and somebody accidentally gets killed or injured because of it,
Yeah.
the reason for the action has some contribution
If you were the
to
one
the
that
factor.
caused the
Right. incident.
series of events to get to that point,
Yeah.
you know, is it reasonably foreseeable that the officer would be shot in a situation like that? Like if a guy, you know, let's just, and I don't know the facts of this case, so I'm not trying to argue it, but, you know, if they were chasing a guy and the guy reached under his bed and pulled out a gun and the other guy shot her by mistake, yeah, he's probably liable for that. The guy, the defendant who pulled the gun.
Now, lastly,
Yeah.
if you were the defense attorney for Luigi, okay, how would you go about getting your picking your jury?
Luigi?
Luigi Mangione, you know, free Luigi.
Oh, the coward that shot the
Yeah, the guy
executive in the back walking
right.
down the street?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, jury selection is gut. It's all feeling. It's all about what is your case about, what are you trying to portray.
He's got a
and-
fan club. You'd have to
Yeah.
eliminate all the young women.
Yep, you would probably.
How
have
would
to
you
do
get away with
you'd
that?
You'd have to try to get people that for one reason or another aren't real big fans of insurance company, health insurance companies, any type of insurance company. You know, people that have been wronged by insurance companies. I had a case years and years ago. It was an armed robbery. The state said it was my guy was collecting drug tax money. Okay. The real case to me is my guy got ripped off and he went to go get his money back and he stabbed a guy with a steak knife. Okay. And so they charged it as an armed robbery, and there was this, we were going through the jury selection, and I had this older gentleman. I said, "You never been a victim of an armed robbery?" He goes, "Oh yeah." He goes, "What?" So, well, you know, when I was younger, I worked at my aunt and uncle's grocery store, and we got robbed 2-3 times. Okay. So I kept him on the jury, and the judge was like, "What are you doing? Why are you keeping this old man on the jury? He looks like he's real conservative." I said, "I got a hunch." Okay. And in my closing argument, I said, "This isn't an armed robbery." I said, "An armed robbery is when you walk in and you point a gun at somebody and you say, 'Give me your money.'" And I walked right up to him and pointed it at him and go, "That's what a robbery is." You know, if you're collecting money for the local street gang, you don't go with a steak knife. You go with something a little bit stronger. Got a not guilty, talked to the jury afterwards, and he was my best friend on the jury.
Here's
He
your guy.
was my guy. He said, "That was no armed robbery." He goes, "I was robbed." He goes, "I know what that's all about." So, point to get back to what you were saying is you really got to know your case, and you really got to know what what your theory of your defense is to drive home to try to get 1, 2, 3 people to get on your side. 12 Angry Men. There's another movie for it.
So what would you
Revert
do
back.
if you were the prosecuting attorney? I mean, you get how many exclusions do you get?
It depends on the state, but you get, you can get 6. If it's a death
6
penalty case,
reject-
you get more. You can just say, I don't like him. Out. Okay. Okay. And then you have cause. Like, then you have to argue with the judge. It's like the reason why this person shouldn't be on the jury is they can't be fair. And the judge will go, yeah, let him go. Okay. Or I could just say, I don't like the way you look. You're gone.
This
but you only
guy's-
get so many of those. They're
This
called
guy's
preemptory
gonna
challenges.
he's gonna walk.
You think so?
Oh yeah,
I
he's
don't.
gonna walk.
Listen, it's.
You'd have to have an all-male jury, and they'd have to be guys that like
I will
insurance
tell
companies.
you,
Who likes
Danny,
insurance
Danny,
companies?
Danny, I don't
you
care.
don't even like insurance
Danny,
companies.
I don't like insurance companies. I will tell you this.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of juries in my day. Jurors take their jobs very, very seriously.
Oh yeah.
No. It's not. People go like, oh yeah, if I was in a jury, I would do this. No. When you start going through the process, and people have also, I always talk to my jurors, and they always say the same thing. They never expected that. Okay. Once you get in there, and now you're put under oath, and you have to answer questions, and now you have to swear an oath that you're going to be unbiased, and you're
follow
going to
the law.
follow the law, and you're going to give both sides the opportunity to be heard, and you have to pass judgment on another human being. When you go back there and you shut that door and you have to deliberate, it's a very, very powerful thing, and you're accountable to everybody else.
So it wipes out some prejudices.
There are people that can't stand what they did, but they did it anyways because they followed the law, and that's what the facts told them they needed to do. Personally, they had an issue with it. Okay? Personally, they didn't want to do what they did, but they knew that that's what their oath was to do. That's what the law told them to do. That's what the facts told them to do. And they did it.
Well, so the system works.
Most of the time it does. Most of the time it does. I mean, listen, there was a period of time in the 70s and 80s, John Burge, his whole crew, they were beating the crap out of people. They were forcing confessions. We had more people at one point that were released off of death row in Illinois that were actually executed. There was always a joke when I was going to law school. I first started out, and you'd always hear about somebody trying to escape from District 2 down on Wentworth by jumping out the window.
Yeah, those
Right?
skinny little windows.
No. They would hang them out the window by their ankles. And if they didn't confess, they would drop them.
Oh Christ.
Okay?
Yeah.
They would take the typewriter. Back then they had typewriter covers, plastic covers. And they put them over their heads. They'd suffocate you. Okay? The other famous one was they would take a phone book. And they'd take a phone book, they'd put it over your head, and they'd hit you with a billy club. It wouldn't leave any marks, but it'd rattle your brain enough. Okay?
Wow.
Two
I wonder
guys,
how they discovered that.
Jackie and Andrew Wilson, they were charged, and my old law professor represented Jackie Wilson. They were charged with killing 2 Chicago police officers. Now, the one brother was a bad guy. The other guy was just with his brother, okay? And this came out in federal court because they sued him. They tied alligator clips to his ears and to his testicles and put him on a box,
Wow.
okay?
Like
so
the French were an Algerian.
yeah, and that practice within the Chicago Police Department carried on with some other detectives that, to the point where there's a lot of stuff that's gotten thrown out of Cook County because of that. That's why now you see cameras in all the interview rooms and whatnot. That was before all that time. There was no cameras. There was no nothing. All right?
Yeah,
So-
the body cameras have changed a lot of things too.
Listen, they're a great help to us at times, and they're. I didn't do that. I was perfect on the field sobriety test. Yeah, why don't you come look the video? And they're like, "Oh, no, you weren't good on that. No, no, you weren't. You did not do the field test. In a pristine condition, in a pristine manner."
I don't drink at all if I'm going to drive. I won't even have one drink.
No.
Because if I get pulled over for whatever reason, I'm not going to lie to a cop. And what did you have any? Well, you can always say I don't answer questions.
I don't drink, so it's not an issue. I don't have to worry about it.
Listen, getting a DUI, the average people can get them. It's not the crime of the century. You go out for a couple of drinks, you have a couple glasses of wine, and then on the way home, and then, I used to do lectures at high schools, and I would have high school kids come up and try the field sobriety test, and half of them would fail it. Okay, so those tests aren't really any kind of indication of your.
I
of
couldn't
your
walk a
ability.
line.
Yeah. Well, here's not even that. Here's part of the test. Part of the test is that you need to stand with your one foot in front of the other.
Right.
Okay, and then listen to the instructions. Now you stand with one foot in front of the other, heel to toe, for about 2.5 minutes while the guy explains to you the instructions.
And you're teetering.
And tell me that you're not going to wobble, you're not
Yeah,
going to step
you're
off.
teetering.
Oh, check, you're off. It's
Well,
done.
some
All right?
people say that those tests are designed
They are.
so you will fail them.
Yeah.
They basically are.
To
They're-
give them a
they're
reason
very,
to
very-
take the next step.
Well, the only time that you can't take the next step, the tough one for them, is just never admit you were drinking.
Yeah.
Because they need a reason to stop you, tail light, speeding, whatever. Then they have to make their observations: odor of alcohol, slurred speech, glassy eyes. Okay, and then the one that's the killer is admits to drinking. I had 2 beers. I retire on 2 beers. I mean, if I heard every DUI that I just had 2 beers. I mean, it's standard response. The one where it stumps the cop is where you say, nope, I haven't had anything to drink. I haven't had anything to drink. Oh, I smell, nope, I haven't had anything to drink. Did you? Nope, I haven't had anything to drink.
So even though you're blowing a breathalyzer,
You don't do anything.
Oh.
You don't do anything. You don't take a test. You don't walk the line. You don't touch your nose.
So if he asks you to
don't-
blow, you say no.
Nope. You be polite. You be respectful, and you just say no. And you don't get beat up, which was the start of this conversation about police brutality.
Yeah.
Right? Who was it? Chris Rock. Was it Chris Rock that said like the instructions on how to not get shot by the police?
Yeah.
Just do what the popo tells you to do.
Yeah.
Okay? That's all. We know enough cops. How many cops do we know that would just beat the crap out of somebody just because they would? Not many.
Maybe 1% or
Not
less.
one. Not a lot, right? It's just a big fallacy. And it's perpetuated by the media and a lot of other people. You know, George Floyd didn't die because he was black. Died because he was fucked up. Pardon my language, you're not supposed to swear on it.
Yeah.
Okay? The guy was ODing on fentanyl. There's still some question as to whether or not he died of a fentanyl overdose because he couldn't breathe.
Well, if he hadn't been going around the neighborhood intimidating people, he would have never.
Right.
You know.
I mean, the thing that the cop probably did wrong in that case, and there's people going to be arguing with me, and that's fine. He probably sat on his back, not his chest and on him, but he had his knee on his upper back for about 4 minutes too long. They should have gotten him the help that he needed.
So that he
Okay.
couldn't breathe.
But he couldn't breathe because one of the side effects of overdosing in fentanyl is it diminishes your
slows
breathing.
ability.
Okay, I have friends of mine that's an anesthesiologist. He said, "Yeah, I mean, it'll stop you breathing like that after a while, and as you get hyper and you're starting breathing harder, you can't get enough. I can't breathe," and it took over. There's a lot of people that still question the medical examiners on that case as to the cause of death. We'll see. We'll see.
Well,
You know, it was bad. Let's not kid ourselves. It set off a firestorm.
That
it shouldn't have been.
guy Floyd was no poster child for innocent people getting in.
And he didn't deserve to die because he overdosed on fentanyl. They should have gotten him the help. They should have called the paramedics. They should have done the right thing. I'm not saying that they weren't at fault at all. The guys that I feel bad for are the 2 cops that were they were being the trainees.
yeah.
And they what? It's a hierarchical order. The sergeant says you don't do anything, you don't do anything. I'm a probationary officer trying to make a job here. And what am I supposed to do is knock my sergeant off the guy and take over? Those guys are just following orders.
Well,
Crazy.
If I was only following orders.
Well, yep. Except we didn't put the people in the office. So next week, if you guys are interested, there is a Netflix series or a program about a concert that happened in Texas involving Travis. Was it Travis? I think they were,
Okay.
where some people died, and us being in the industry, we decided that we're going to kind of watch it and take a note, and then kind of maybe do a post-mortem on it and talk about some of our experiences and get back to our music concert
Our music
security,
roots.
our security roots. So
So
if
keep
you have a
those-
chance over the next week, if you want to be part of the conversation and take a look at it, I know we've got some guys that used to work for us that might be interested in
giving us
Pop it in on
their 2 cents.
always. All
But
right.
yeah, it's been quite an interesting experience with this. But I think at this point we've
Any other questions? Nothing? We're good?
You had Catherine tune in with just tuned in. Sorry, DeSantis wanted to ban many books, including race issues, gender issues, etc. He made teachers afraid to enlighten their students on classics that address these subjects. And also just chimed in on the movie recommendation, said completely agree. The Led Zeppelin recommendation for myself, A Star is Born, produced several times, was my first invitation into musical theater.
There you go. Forgot about that one. Yep.
George Cukor.
Yep.
Okay.
All
I
right.
have to look into this DeSantis thing. Thank you.
All right. So until next week.
Next week.
It's next week. Have a
next
good
week.
time. And
You guys gonna sign off?
yeah.
Good night, Mrs. Calabash.
Good night,
wherever-
Mrs. Calabash, wherever you are.